Batu, Barada, Nikto.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I'm joined by the demon, Julian Darius.
I'm not the demon. I'm the innocent victim who's been forced to commit all of those terrible crimes because the world is going to end. You know,
That's right.
It's not my fault.
That's a great, I think it's a great course in the case in court. It'd be an alibi. That was, it wasn't me. Demon made me do it. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We have got to the last, as of this moment, last episode of Black Mirror. It's a Red Mirror production. We sort of alluded to that last episode, but this actually calls it out as a Red Mirror production. Demon 79 in North England, 1979. A meek sales assistant is told she must commit terrible acts to prevent a disaster. More importantly, she is visited upon by a demon who says she has to kill 3 people in the next 3 days. Otherwise, it will be rained down fire on everything. And so in committing those acts, she starts to unravel slightly. So, Julian, what are your initial thoughts on Demon 79?
I like and am entertained by this episode a lot more than I was the previous episode, the other sort of Red Mirror episode, Maisie Day.
Yeah.
This episode has a lot more going on. It's a lot more interesting. And it's also worth pointing out, it's the second sort of supernatural episode. And it's also the second episode, I believe, along with the astronaut, Beyond the Sea episode that takes place in the past, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot that is being done here that is sort of different than the Black Mirror norm. Okay, with that in mind, okay, I'm entertained by this. I like it more, but it is a mess beyond belief.
Yes.
There is nothing that comes together. And it's one of those plots that you could just like take apart in half a sentence.
Yeah.
It is really a mess. What are your thoughts?
Very, very similar, actually, in that I enjoyed this episode. I did come away thinking I've really enjoyed that episode. I was disappointed with the ending, regardless of how sort of like apocalyptic it is. But one of the things is I like. I'm going to bloody butcher names now, so I really apologize. Papa Asidu. I'm probably the guy who plays Garp, the demon.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's great. I think he's charismatic and funny, and I think he works kind of well. And I like Ajana Vasan, who plays Nida. The 2 main leads in this, I think this is where this helps. The 2 main leads in this are better. Like, they've got a bit of chemistry. She kind of works. This whole thing, it's sort of like, I'm enjoying watching them and how this unravels. This sort of like meek Asian woman, as she's sort of like, living alone in Northern England in 1979, working in this sort of retail, this shoe shop. Like, I'm actually kind of liking like how it's unfolding. And like you said, the thing is, the more it does, the more it starts to stumble over itself, and then it reaches a really sort of like messy ending. But it's still kind of entertaining. I'm still got to the end, and I'm like, oh, kind of smiling at that. I know it wasn't good, but I smile at it because there are certain bits in it that work, more so than, let's say, Maisie Day. Yeah.
I mean, I would even say that the police officer, Len Fisher, played by Sean Dooley,
yes,
who it's very telling that he's reading Smiley's People, the Jean Le Carré novel, earlier, which came out in this era.
Yeah,
it was a conclusion of the Russian trilogy. Because he's clearly, it's like, oh, okay, you see him later, this is clearly he's smiling, right?
Yeah.
And he even has the look. So I like him in this role. I sort of wasn't smiling at the ending.
Oh, I hate the ending. I
Just
hate the ending. But
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, there's stuff I like here. I'm entertained by it, but so just backing up, right? So obviously, terrible racism, right? By the way, I 90% of the food that I eat is Asian food. My condo smells like garlic and curry all day long, all the time. I sometimes am embarrassed opening the door at the smell of my own apartment. So and I've heard people say, not in Hawaii, but people elsewhere say that they don't want to rent to Indians because they will smell up an apartment with curry, which I think is terribly racist and stupid and not actually accurate at all and dumb. And but that's absolutely in play. So I mean,
Hmm?
the racial elements of this, I find the most exciting and interesting aspects of this episode. The political elements, obviously this is the rise of Margaret Thatcher in the same year. This reconnects with the National Front
Yeah.
is here. We all know these horror stories of National Front crimes. I mean, really, it was a terrorist organization.
Mm.
And obviously, we're back in this populist, anti-immigrant sort of era today that looks back on this earlier era. And so all of this I like, and that's the stuff that I find most interesting. Murder is always entertaining,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the way in which the main character struggles to murder and struggles with being a good person, right? And how to judge who's a good person. All that stuff I like, and it's working. None of the stuff with the demon, he's entertaining. I agree with you. He's entertaining to watch, but none of the stuff with the demon works for me.
Mm.
Right as soon as she finds the glyph, right? That's like initially it's the glyph from, past episodes from Bandersnatch and from that
White Bear
terrible
and
White Bear. Yeah.
well, that symbol has just been everywhere. It just keeps appearing in all kinds of different pieces. Yeah, it becomes if you actually look in the and this is why I wanted. This is why I was so pissed off at the ending when it shows you flashes forward the future of
Mm-hmm.
the politician
Yes.
Keith Holligan. No, that's not him. It's one of the politician.
You
He
see
has it.
Metalhead, right?
Yes, you see Metalhead, which I
You
love
see the
that.
Metalhead briefly,
But
which I don't know
also
if that means that the Metalhead episode is
quite
in an
possibly,
alternate future. And I
yeah.
mean,
Oh, Michael Smart is the character, yeah. But
mm,
he has his symbol on his thing is the white bear, the
the
symbol.
glyph.
So the
Yeah.
glyph. So it's there in all these different bits and pieces. So I agree. So sorry, carry on. I just wanted to call it out.
Right, but it doesn't really mean anything, right? Again, it's this kind of like stupid thing Black Mirror does where it's like Easter eggs instead of really any meaningful connection, which, okay, that's fine. But I mean, like, we're not supposed to watch this and think, right, this is part of the larger Bandersnatch branching universe time.
Mm.
No, it's just a glyph. I mean, but the whole demon thing, like, so she gets this glyph thing,
It's
and
rune. It's almost like a rune, isn't it? It's a bone rune, as he refers to it. Yeah.
well, and there's a lot in the basement where she's forced to eat her Indian food. There's these articles about murders and stuff, and oh, okay, who was the guy who used to go down there? Never gonna find out. Doesn't really matter. That would have been interesting to me. But then we have this demon, and the demon speaks. He speaks with a British accent. He speaks very
He
matter
speaks
of
with
factly.
he also speaks with a northern. I love it. He speaks with a northern accent, English. Yeah, so I love that
so
as
so
well.
it's interesting, right? I mean,
Mm.
it's almost like sort of subversion of expectations is the same way of sort of like John Constantine being a working class
Scouse.
mage.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But then I want to get back to these signifiers for you as a Brit, but I want to just say briefly that like that's interesting. I don't know why he does that, or why he is, I mean, is an apprentice demon.
Ugh,
Who
yeah.
was using the rune before? Was that assigned to a different demon, and now they're like, right, that magical object, we're reassigning the demon that goes to? I get, and so obviously he lies. So there's this whole thing of like, is he lying or is he not? But the whole premise of you've got to kill 3 people on 3 different nights, or over 3 nights, or the world will end.
Ugh.
Obviously, has to be a lie. I mean, that is the
Right.
stupidest
Sorry,
idea I've ever seen in a supernatural
Okay.
story.
I've got to say this, right? This is. I'm sorry to interrupt, and this is the thing, because this is. I think this is where whilst I was smiling when I came out of this episode, because I like some of the chemistry, I thought some of the moments were really good, and there was some other stuff, and we'll talk about that. Can I just say how pissed off I was at the ending, because this whole episode sets up something else and then pays off with possibly the dullest version of this ending.
Mm-hmm.
So the ending is she doesn't quite make it. She finally chooses to attack Michael Smart. So we'll go the politician.
Right.
Doesn't succeed. I just want to play this out. I'm so sorry, but I've got to,
right.
you're burning, right. It's burning a hole in my head, right? Like a demonic rune. She fails. This guy, like you said, the detective stops her. Okay, she's then taken to prison or taken to the police station, and she goes all Sarah Connor. She's like, if I failed, if I haven't done this thing by midnight, hellfire is gonna blaze. And you've seen this sort of stuff in the background. There's been sort of like political east-west kind of like Soviet Union, Cold War kind of things going on, right?
Well, so just a quick interjection. The first time it's effective, the demon gives her a vision of what this is going to look like. And it's the house burning down. And then she looks out the window and basically everything is on fire.
Yeah.
Could be done a little better, but I like that. She feels the pain. She's traumatized by it. But then you see in the background the sort of Watchmen-esque escalation of nuclear tensions.
Yes.
And even though it's inconsistent, which is part of my objection with what he's shown her of just these flames, we're sort of come to believe that, and he says explicitly, that's what's going to happen. Right?
Yeah,
you're watching the end of the world tensions ratchet up, which I guess the demon is controlling international tensions. I mean,
well, no, right?
Already stupid.
But
then
stupid,
you get to the end.
But
right.
Well, I want to throw in.
And she watches the clock go to midnight.
Yeah, he keeps talking about other people's futures, right? And we'll get to this. But you see the clock goes to midnight, and then nothing happens, and you're like, oh, it's all a ruse. It's all a stupid thing. Then the police,
maybe he was a hallucination after
or it could be a hallucination,
right?
Or it could be something else, which I want to get to. I'll get to my version of this later. And then they step out. There's all these sirens and shouting, and they step out, and she's left in the room, and the demon appears. But then it goes to the police, and they look out the window, and the nuclear bombs are falling, and you see these mushroom clouds coming up, and that's it. That's the ending. Like, she didn't succeed, and so this thing has happened. And then she agrees to go spend Oblivion with him, for eternity in Oblivion with him. And they do a walkout. What the world goes into slow-mo, and there's all flames behind them, right? So fine. Utter horseshit.
Yes, absolutely. Looks great. That nuclear it looks great. It's great seeing them at the giant wall of windows.
Right.
Looks great.
So can we just say, can we just say though? So 2 things he says throughout this is how he can see the future, and he keeps saying he shows at the beginning what could happen if she fails. So there's 2 alternative timelines here. Then, if you fail, this is what happens: everyone dies. Right, burning north of England goes up in flames because of these nuclear weapons. If you do succeed, everyone's safe. But depending on who you choose to kill, will dictate what happens in the future. Because you kill this guy who's molesting his daughter, but she'll come out of it. If you stop him now, she'll be able to sort of recover. And if you don't do it, actually, she goes on to kill herself at the age of 28.
Right.
Okay, well, that's one timeline. You then sort of get this whole thing around the politician, and you see him becoming this sort of like almost like
Trump-esque
sort of like fascist leader, sort of like And you go, that's his future. And I'm still going, yeah, but if the bombs drop, none of that happens.
So why are you seeing any of this?
So how is this deterministic? Like, what? I don't understand how this future thing works.
Well, it's not deterministic, right?
No,
it's
it's
the
not.
most silly,
Right.
non-deterministic, time-changing, but it
Yeah.
doesn't explore any of that.
No.
That's just a little method for the demon to assure her,
Right.
Stuff.
I've got to get them out. I'm going to tell you what
Yeah.
it should have been. I'm so sorry. I know to our listeners. This might be one of the last time.
Well, I mean, this is an episode that has basically, branching histories.
Yeah.
But doesn't explore any of it, right? Because I mean, it would be very interesting to see
if you're going to use the glyph.
What are the ripple effects of
exactly.
who you've killed, right?
Right. Here's how this. So,
also, why do demons see the future? What do they need to see? I mean,
I also hate. I'm really beginning to hate this trope of I'm a demon from hell. We've got to do these bad things, but I'm kind of a good guy. Like I don't really want to have to do this. I'm just a bureaucrat. I hate that interpretation of it now. It's beginning to get really boring. It makes me think of, ever seen the film Bedazzled? They did the one. There was the one with Liz Hurley and what's it? But the original one was Dudley Moore, Peter Cook in '67, which is way better, by the way. But anyway, what this should have been, right? She kills a white guy who's molesting his daughter, but the molestation is never going to come out because the girl's never going to report it. So a white guy gets attacked in the canal, right?
Yes.
And then 2 white guys get attacked in their home by an Asian woman, right? And then a leading politician gets 3 people killed. And then a leading politician gets attacked on the road by a raving lunatic Asian woman, Indian
and
woman.
not just that, but a politician who's spoken out against immigration.
100%, right? So here's the thing. The end of this episode should totally be, you've seen that future, and the demon comes back, and she's like, I failed. And he's like, no, you succeeded. You're now arrested. The world now sees that you're
the danger
a danger
of you Indian immigrants.
The danger of you Indian immigrants.
Yes.
Michael Smart is now going to go on to be voted. He's going to vote it in. You've assured that future that I showed you.
Yes. Right. Yep. And that's totally there. I mean, I thought because the racial angle is so played up, and again, it's the part of the episode that I find most interesting is the politics, and we've had many conversations about the role of race and in British politics and even British Indian identity. I read about this. This is a fascinating subject. All of those elements are woven through the story, which is crystal clear that she, and that she's going to go after the politician, and it's crystal clear that that's going to be played as, the Indian attacking, the white male politician who spoke out against immigration, proving, that's all right there. And then instead, what it does instead of what you're doing, right? I like what you're saying about how she's ensured that future. The demon says, like, he's our guy, right? We like what he's doing. He's going to kill a lot of people.
He doesn't say we. He says, well, no, they're upstairs. And that's the whole manipulation. He's going, look, I'm on your side. Like, look, don't do this because it's a bad move. They're on to it. They want him protected. Oh, well, in that case, I want to kill him even more. Oh, all right. I've warned you.
But, I like what you're saying about ensuring that future, right?
Yeah.
But, I mean, so that's also part and parcel of like how this hasn't gotten, as you say, this future vision thing doesn't pay off, doesn't really work, doesn't make sense. But all of what it's set up with the stuff that I find most interesting has no payoff whatsoever. It's totally irrelevant to the plot. It's a red herring. And instead, it focuses on the demon. And the demon is real. There's no ambiguity at the ending. Right. There's, that ambiguity is stripped away. And everything about the demon is terrible, with the exception of the performance. So what we're left with is, you said like he's a bureaucrat, but let's be crystal clear. As much as he's encouraging her to murder, and he says there's got to have been some darkness in you for me to have been summoned. And I sort of like that element.
I like that. You're corruptible, but not corrupted. And I like that. Yeah.
No, that stuff is really good. And that whole dynamic of like, who do I kill? Did I kill it? I killed an innocent, but I also killed a bad guy. but he's, I don't like that he's a murderer, so it doesn't count. That's stupid. But the whole thing from the start is, A, is the demon real or is the demon a hallucination? B, what does the demon say that is accurate? And he lies right from the get-go, right? Says, I'll leave, and then he doesn't, right? So he's like, sorry, I lied. So we know he's a liar. Obviously, traditionally, Satan's the father of lies, demons lie, but he tells a whole series of things about supernatural events and prophecy and all of this, right? So he could easily, outside of be showing her hallucination. They don't have to be real. We have no idea if anything that he said is real. He said, the world is going to end in 3 days. So really, I'm a good guy. I'm trying to save the world. And you need to kill these people because it's better than billions dying, right? Ethically, totally correct if you believe that the world is really ending and this person's telling the truth, right? But everything hinges on that. He's also explained, this person is a bad person, that person isn't. We want you to, like the people upstairs like this. I mean, he's conveyed a lot of information about really how the afterlife works. He's a demon in training. Doesn't explain who had the rune thing before him, but he's a demon in training. If he fails that training, he's cast out and lives forever, but in an endless void of nothingness. I mean, there's an awful lot here that you have to believe or not believe about what the demon says. The least interesting outcome is that all of the racial stuff is a red herring, and everything the demon's been saying is true. So at the end of the story, the demon is the hero. Well, he was trying to save the world.
Yeah.
What kind of was he in charge of these nuclear tensions? What would there have even been escalating nuclear tensions if she didn't find the rune?
I'm happy to have this thing of like, well, that's the other thing is like what triggered them and sort of like, yeah. But the other thing as well is, right, my question, if I had this, I'm presented with this dilemma, kill 3 people or billions die, right? That's what he sort of says. You go, okay. So how does this work for hell? What do they gain? Well, they gain 3 souls. Yeah, but they'd get those 3 souls and more if all the bombs go off. So again, I don't understand how this thing works. Like, how does it? Why is this? What's the benefit for hell? Like, and if he was just like, well, it's actually just a deal that's been set up. We've gone through this a number of times. It's just sort of like it's paperwork. It's a process, or it's an agreement we have with the other, the other camp or whatever. Like, it's never explained like how you'd be like, well, surely the bombs is preferential because you'll get more souls, or like, I don't understand. Like, oh, but I get to corrupt a single soul. Yeah, but you could get millions of souls. They're all killed with bombs. Like, I don't understand this. Like, one,
right? The power of numbers.
Yeah. Like,
but I really object to. I mean, it seems so transparent that the world's going to end if you don't kill these 3 people is a lie, right? It has to be a lie because we are left to believe that, how many of these runes are in existence, right? This is a world with magic in it, in which there are amulets that summon demons.
Yeah.
It's like rubbing a genie lamp, except the genie says, I'm not going to grant 3 wishes. You have to kill 3 people, and unless you do, the world will end. So apparently this has happened time and time again. All around the world, there are these, things. It certainly happened, in Britain before. Had been left in this drawer in the basement, right?
When they live next to a canal, which you could easily be just thrown into a canal and forgotten about.
Yes, right. That's true. All right. When I thought they'd throw the murder weapons into the canal, they don't do that. But so, I mean, surely the most obvious lie is that the world is going to end unless you commit these murders, right? Hell wants you to commit these murders. Okay, I kind of buy that, whatever. But surely the one thing that makes no sense is that everyone who ever summons a demon then better do what that demon wants, or the entirety of creation in a Judeo-Christian, world focused on the earth and humanity will burn by nuclear fire or whatever.
Can we
That's
also
the
just
one thing that makes no sense.
can I also say
You
I
know
know
that's got to be a lie,
yeah.
but that's not a lie
So how did this
because
work?
this is a stupid episode.
Yeah. So how did that work pre 1945?
Yeah. Well, an angel showed up and his sword. I mean, I don't know. It's dumb. It's just so dumb.
This is where, like you say, this should be about corrupting people and her rage. I mean, this is where when it works. There's this idea. When she loses her temper, but she doesn't externalize it; she internalizes it, and so she sort of like they show these visions or these sort of like in her head where like she's strangling one of the customers that she believes killed his wife, and then another one, the horrible Vicky, the horrible sort of other co-worker, and she grabs her and smashes her head through the glass cabinet. I love that. I mean, that looks great. And she gets up and her head's all bloody and covered in glass. I'm like, that looks like a sort of like 70s Hammer or Amicus kind of like horror film. And I'm like, all that looks great. And I'm really thinking, this is cool. I'm loving all the blood splatter in this. Like, it looks good. It's well done.
And also those kind of like the Tarantino-esque or Rodriguez-esque kind of, throwback to Hammer horror films and stuff. Yeah, I love that stuff too.
Yeah, all that's working for me. Like, that's really cool. But it shows that, like, she it's just happenstance that this angry, corruptible person that's been made frustrated by people treating her this way. But let's be clear, the two people that she sort of loses her temper at, one of them is sort of like, is basically overtly racist. And the other one's a bit of a pervert. So they're trying to, again, they're going into this thing of like, oh, she's a woman. So there's this, this idea of sort of like pervy men, but also she's an Asian woman in 1971. So there's this overt racism towards her, but she has to keep it under control. But even that's never addressed. They've never sort of like, look, this is an opportunity for you to not only save the world, but you can release that pent up aggression. You can do it for the right reasons, kill the right kind of people, sort of thing. But what happens if someone who's not corruptible, like someone's just some people just cleaning out the cupboards and they come across that thing and find the rune and they get blood on it? Like,
I don't know.
Like, does the demon come out and go, "Oh, you're not corruptible, or you are corrupted and you've killed people, so I can't really work with you. Can you pass me on to somebody else?"
The problem is the plot makes no sense if the demon's not real, right? You can run a story where it's ambiguous and you're left not knowing, right? That works fine. But here, the plot makes no sense from start to finish if the demon's not real, right? I mean, the plot certainly in the ending, that's the case. But that is the least interesting aspect. Nothing about the demon makes any kind of sense. Nothing about that demon it's not that it's not interesting. You pointed out like the these racial incidents, the sort of pervy guy, who's a killer and all this. All of that stuff is interesting, but it then gets reduced to the demon saying you were corruptible, right? But not yet corrupted. So there was something about you that, attracted me or made that rune thing work, right? Okay. So, I mean, that's kind of interesting, but again, it doesn't explore this as a theme. It doesn't even, outside of implicitly explore the idea of an Indian woman or a woman of Indian descent who presumably is a British citizen, murdering a white politician who's anti-immigrant. It doesn't even explore that. It doesn't even have a nod to that, right? It's implicit. And so, it seems to me that all of those things those are thrown on the kidling, of the episode because it wants to go in this, more dramatic way or goes for this ending. And it would seem to me far more interesting if the play, like you said, her rage is then used by the demon, to sort of like, you're doing something for your people. You're doing something to ensure your place, in a better future. I don't care about that. I want you to commit these 3 murders, right? We don't even need an apocalypse. The apocalypse can be like, this politician that you're seeing, like, this is going to go in some bad ways. Let me show you, what this is going to do. And instead of the world ending, then it becomes and then at the end, like you said, it could be like, well, you've actually ensured this future that you did all of this to prevent, and you could be trapped in a sort of like cynical Black Mirror kind of ending where, it's like, as a minority, as a person of relative powerlessness in Britain, you can act out to try to prevent injustice, but in the end, you're still playing into that system, and you've wound up creating a backlash bigger than anything you could have controlled or
Yes.
wanted to stop in the first place. And that would have been a cynical, very much like an early Black Mirror episode of, sort of like, well, the powerless are damned if they do and damned if they don't. You're
Yeah.
screwed if you're a minority in Britain.
No,
Like,
100%.
that's a powerful episode.
Yeah, you either keep your head down and you stay oppressed, or you lose your temper and you are then identified as being a dangerous element, and therefore people rage against you. So you're right. You're damned if you do. You're damned if you do. That's what it should be. But it shouldn't. You don't. In all honesty, you don't even need to be in 1979 for that to happen. You could easily do 2022 or 2023. Like, it still works. Unfortunately, in this country. In fact, more so at the moment. Look, it could be really sort of prescient. Yeah, it just, you're right. It just feels. We've said this for the last couple of episodes, and like, it gets to something, and it's just like, I'm gonna wander off and do something else, or like, I'm not really gonna do that. I want to do this, but like, not things that are linked or even interesting, or like, it keeps. But you've said about the Easter eggs as well. It presents things. The one thing. And again, you could go down trope channels, but this thing of having the newspaper articles that she's reading through. So her food, as you said about the food, like, she eats in the storeroom, and she said it's not, can you not eat your curry in there because it's, people, think about your other colleagues and other stuff. And so she gets sent down into the basement. And whilst there, she comes across this desk, and there's all these newspaper articles, like a wall was pushed on someone and someone else was killed another way, and this other stuff. And that's when she finds the rune. And so you're told that, like, oh, this has happened before. That's what you're taking from that. Oh, this has happened before. Like, someone's had to kill these people and they were successful. So, all right, cool.
What about that?
Yeah. Who was that? Was that the shop? Was that her manager? Was it the original shop owner? Was it?
Yeah, who was that original guy who would always work in the basement, right? That the manager sort of alludes to. We never find this out.
How did he come across the rune? Like, is this sort of, was it handed to him by somebody else? Did he find it on a beach? Like, it's nice
that
that
whole
it shows
basement thing could be really interesting, and it doesn't. Again, it just goes in a different direction.
Yeah, I don't know. It just
super minor point about that. What she's eating, what she has for that day, isn't even a curry. Like, it's biryani, it's rice. Like, everything that I eat.
She says biryani, which is a sign of she's like a spice dish. Yeah,
that was biryani.
Yeah, biryani. But even so, it's not. I mean, it's not that bad.
No, it's not smell. It's like, oh my god, everything that I eat is so much smellier than this. Like, oh my god.
But I like, there's certain. They have to set it in 1879 because they want it to have, like you say, connotations with Thatcher, and the National Front being a very prominent element in British society at the time, and that's all fine. But
they could play that up a lot more than they do, needs to right? Be, like, where's the fear of like NF being spray painted on your door as those guys watch right after those guys watch you enter your not so posh apartment, right? Well, like, you don't really fear for her, right? You should be, like, it should play that up a little more, right?
Without, I want to be, again, I want to be careful about how this comes out. So, little thing about British, and how Britain has, no, actually, because it's happened across the world. It happens in America because it's a known thing. It's always happened. Similar ethnic groups congregate. Yeah. And let's be clear about sort of like Indian and Pakistani and Asian sort of families, very close. Like, way more so than
white nuclear families.
The white nuclear family. Like, they'll have multiple generations in a house. They all live close to each other. They're a very close-knit community. Like, to the extent of like, there will be an Asian or Indian part of an estate or a part of a city or a town or whatever. Like, that's where most, and that's
And
obviously
these are
why.
stereotypes, but there's truth to
But
that, right?
there's
I mean,
true. Well, I can drive
and
to.
let's be clear, part of the reason why there is, a Chinatown or, or a Muslim area of a British city is because of, racism too,
Hmm.
right? And poverty and coming in. But you're right. Okay, so you're not incorrect. Yeah.
So my point being, though, and then this is probably a budgetary thing, maybe, but she lives
Where's
alone.
her supports group?
Where's her
Right.
exactly?
Yeah.
Where's her family? Where's it? Like, all right, she's not a friend, she's alone. But like, I do not buy that this, relatively shy young Asian woman or Indian woman has not got like parents or brothers and sisters or a support network. Or like, let's be clear as well, like, they're not all, I'm not saying they're all religious, but one of the other reasons that they, that like we congregate as a species is because of like similarities. You will obviously find a lot of people that go to Catholic schools or Catholic churches will live near a Catholic church, but they don't travel far. So in these communities, that's where you have like a Jewish community will be near the synagogue, Muslim communities near the mosque. Like, it makes sense. So you have like religious congregation as well. But like, this community seems to be made up of like lots of white people and one Asian woman. And I'm just like,
that is,
no, this really doesn't work. Like, there should be this idea they keep talking about. Oh, it's a wave of immigration. Not here. You've got one Asian woman. Like, this is a trickle.
Not in this episode.
Yeah, there's a trickle at best. Like, it feels again like they've just sort of like, this should have, again, pressure from maybe a family about keeping your head down and doing well. And that's where the rage
just
has
ignore
come from.
it, right?
Turn the other cheek, just ignore it. They're wrong. There are good people out there, blah 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 blah. And like, and the fact that like she's the fact that she's attracted to the dancer from Boney M or something, like, well, that's not what that's not what good girls are about. Just keep your head down, find a good Indian man, and all this other stuff. Like, like there should be some kind of pressure involved in this that sort of allowed her to be bubbling up this whole time. It doesn't turn the pressure up enough in that. So when she does have these rage moments, or it should feel like rage moments, like it should feel like a release.
Yeah, no, you're right. So those rage moments just come from her as an individual, right? They're not an expression of her community or something going on in Britain more generally, right? I mean, it wants to kind of gesture toward that with a politician, but and I think the whole sort of Demon 79 thing is, the demonic forces unleashed in that year in British politics, and obviously the National Front didn't start in 79, but there were a lot of beatings, and a lot of, killings and things like that. I mean, it's not just this sort of nice, this is almost like, it's like if this were in America, this would be a black person, right, who is treated terribly and, is told not to, wear their hair that way, and cook that food kind of stuff, and is high, repressing anger from it and whatever. But, like when the KKK marks your door, that's scary. Like that's not just a little characterization.
Can we just I just want to back up on one other thing. One of the things about the National Front, it wasn't just about the numbers coming over. Like, now, currently, the British government's very much about the small boats, and it's all about the numbers of people coming over. That was actually not really a big part of the problem in the 70s. We'd already had a large migration from the West Indies. We had sort of like a large sort of like black communities and stuff, Windrush, and we'd had all that sort of. So it wasn't new to be having people coming from, from other parts of the world to live in Britain. Not a big thing. Like, it was happening. The Asian community sort of built up in the 60s and 70s. But one of the big things for the National Front was about integration. Oh, we're losing our Britishness. They're taking away this, they're taking away that. It wasn't just about jobs. It was like, we're losing our Britishness, right? We're losing our culture. They're taking over. Cool.
Hence the national of national.
100%, right? So, okay, interesting. That's where you're going to go. So you're going to show, not only are you going to have this single Indian woman, or should we find her ancestry, but you're then going to present her with a northern accent, so, and also wearing fully Western clothes.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no trace of her. The food seems to be the sort of token that they throw it, but like, there's no jewelry, there's no sari, there's no, she's not wearing
religious angle. She's not an Indian Muslim, or
there's
Hindu.
there's no, oh my God, my mind has gone blank. But yeah, there's a lot of like with Indian culture, there's a lot of like jewelry and I'm sounding incredibly
signifiers, cultural signifiers other than food. Right?
Exactly, because it feels
which, by the way, is the widest signifier you can have, right?
Well, it's easy.
Like, white people like their ethnic food. So it's like, I'm going to write a Chinese story. They're going to have a lot of sweet and sour sauce. That's going to be the indicator.
Yeah, 100%.
Also kind of super racist, right?
Yeah. And I'm thinking, like, where's all sort of like the other bits, like her family, but also like other sort of signifiers that, like, we recognize as being, it represents that culture. Like, if you had an Asian-looking Indian guy who's wearing a turban, you go, he's Sikh. Cool. Right, he's probably that sort of that's something we're not used to. You sort of like, you go, that was a bit of an odd one, sort of like to those as an external signifier. Well, she doesn't even have that. Like, and I find that kind of weird for it being 1979. Yes, there's that been. She's not, as you said, she's not first. She's not sort of like a direct immigrant. She's clearly second or first, second, or whatever generation.
Right.
But it just feels like she's watered down to the point of almost being like, look, well, you're brown enough and you're eating smelly food. Yeah. That'll do. And I'm like, oh man, this is really disappointing because there's so much that could be done with this.
One of the best moments is when she sees her coworker, reading that political brochure right in front of her. And, I think of, we were talking about that sort of conundrum in which minorities often find themselves, in which, they're expected to be quiet and polite and fit in with white society, integrate and not be different. And yet if they ever raise their voice about any injustice, then over here it's you're the crazy black man, right? Yes. And watch out if there's a cop nearby with a gun. Then you're playing into the stereotype of you're the problem, right? And so this is a catch-22 in which you're forced to just kind of suffer endless indignities without complaint. Because the alternative is worse. And frankly, that's a heartbreaking situation that could be very easily dramatized without being the sole focus of an episode that still has to deliver its demonic murder entertainment.
Yeah.
And I thought one of the best episodes was that brochure, and thinking about, especially in, Black Lives Matter, thinking about having coworkers who have the, Blue Lives Matter flag, who, are obviously pro-Trump, and you might be Hispanic or Black and, think this is a movement to eradicate my identity. And I have to sit at this job and tolerate your presence, and tolerate you doing these things on this job in a way that, is obviously intolerable. Cannot be tolerable in a democracy, and yet, that indignity I think is very well dramatized, just in that little moment. But this, but again, dropped, in the favor of she happens to be, a minority, and the demon's telling the truth, and I guess thank God for murder.
I do want to thank God for murder. It makes it more interesting. There is a couple of things to point out. You are right. I think 100% I agree that, like, the potential interesting elements of this are lost in favor of thing. Right. Charlie Brooker wasn't the only writer on this. it has also a woman called Bisha K. Ali, who is a screenwriter, comedian, and has done a number of things. So I'm just checking her history. And we've said
British
this thing.
Pakistani.
Yeah, British Pakistani, but also she was one of the creators, writers, and executive producers of Miss Marvel, the Disney Plus show about a Muslim family living in
Oh,
New Jersey.
Amazon, right? Oh no,
No,
Disney
Disney
Plus.
Plus.
Yeah.
Now, I want to say everything that we're complaining about for this episode is in that show.
Ooh.
100%. And this is one of the reasons I really liked Miss Marvel, actually, because I thought like it was well done. I thought the characters were good, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was an entertaining show. But also this thing about having pressure from around pressure about your culture from past previous generations, this idea of having the family support network, being linked with both a religious and cultural community, and how you fit into that as a sort of second or third generation coming up in a different time. That's all in Miss Marvel. So it's not like, it's not like she's thought, oh, I'm just going to do this. So I don't think it's her. This is where I'm looking at this and going like, I think everything that we've talked about
She's hired for the culture, aspect.
I wouldn't, and I'm not going to throw the shade at Netflix or Charlie Brooker, but I suspect to an extent, maybe not at the ending, but I suspect everything that we've talked about was in a draft.
Yeah, that's scary. Or I mean, I don't know. I mean, one of the things that I think I see that often happens is where, if you are depicting, and to some degrees, I mean, this is good, and to some degree, this is bad. Like if you are depicting in media a minority in which that you as a writer are not, it's now become standard practice, to hire a representative of that minority, or somebody who could get the voice right, get some details right, and that's good, right? But then it also can become kind of tokenizing in like, okay, right, I'm really telling a story about a Indian British citizen who's got a demon played by a black man who goes around murdering white people. And it's all kind of good because it's to stave off the apocalypse and the demon's telling the truth. So don't worry. I mean, this is really very confused. So my fear would be that, I don't know we don't know who wrote what, but, maybe there wasn't a draft. Maybe the first draft was the white draft. And this is as far as it got.
Quite possibly. I would highlight, I know, Miss Marvel's probably aimed at a younger audience than us, but it's a better representation of some of the themes that we've talked about in this show, and it's really fun as well. So go check that out if you want to. It's very Disney, it's very Marvel, but it's kind of good fun.
Yeah. Well, the end of the story is the demon was right.
Yeah.
And a
good guy, and a good guy.
Oh, he's a sweetheart, and they're gonna have a lovely, forever after, alone in the void together. Growing old together or not.
Yeah,
growing old
for eternity. But one of the things, like he's already highlighted. She says he looks like a monster in his naturalized form. So he's had to take on a representation of this, the dancer from Boney M thing, right? To play this sort of like, and I love the costume, by the way. I think the costume is ace. But like, how does she know that he's not going to turn back into his monster form and back in the Oblivion? He's got no powers.
I assume he's going to.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's sort of like, I don't want to. She doesn't even ask, like, is there a heaven? Like if I die in nuclear fire, will I?
Do I go to hell? Because I've killed these people.
Like,
yeah.
Is heaven as white as Britain is? I mean, there would be questions there, right? Instead, it's not interested in all these questions, and I think it wants that Terminator 3 ending.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And I'll praise Terminator 3 for going
there. Yeah.
But it wants that ending, and it wants to do an Inglourious Bastards, sort of ending of like, all right, well, the world ended in 79, right? Ha ha, I pulled the rug out from under you again. But it's so confused.
Yeah.
It's so unsatisfying that the demon is real and he's been telling the truth about fucking everything. How is that the answer you settled on? Like, there are a million ways you came up with this great alternate story, but you could equally go other ways with it.
Oh yeah.
All of which would be more satisfying than the demon was right. The world was really at stake, for these 3 murders. None of this even makes any sense or feels emotionally correct, even by your own
No.
terms.
It's
That
yeah.
you set up.
Yeah, we'll talk about it when we get to the wrap up. But no, I think you're right. This is entertaining in the moment, but falls to pieces. Absolutely falls to pieces when you are presented with this ending of her being arrested and then it goes the other way. And like you say, it looks great with the bombs falling, but like when it goes the other way, I'm just like, oh, well, that's kind of disappointing. Like that's kind of like another shoulder shrug where I'm just like, oh, okay. Like you set me up. The rug pull is you've chosen a shit ending. Fair enough. Like,
Yeah, and part of the rug pull is all that stuff I set up doesn't matter.
No.
He's just a politician. It doesn't matter his politics. Demon 79 is not really about the forces unleashed in 79. It's not about racism. It's not about, British identity. It's about the demon in 79 and the end of the world. Aha!
Yeah. Yeah, it's so disappointing when there's so much more that could be done with this. But
there's a lot that's good here, right? I mean, you and I like an awful lot in this episode.
Yeah.
It just
no,
doesn't commit to itself.
Well, this is what I'm finding. We've said this about a couple of episodes now. They just don't commit. Like it's not. It's starting to sort of feel like. Yeah. I'd even say that I think that Charlie Brooker's a bit like he probably walks into with his front of his computer and sort of shrugs and goes, "Well, all right, what shall I write about today?" And then bangs out an episode, and it sort of feels it's beginning to feel like that. Like he's really lost all interest in not just what the show is, because we're moving away from that quite quickly, but also like. I'm even going to say just good storytelling, good structure, it's all coming away at the seams, to be perfectly honest. But anyway.
Well, I think that, the pattern that I see is a writerly focus on elements that you want, right? And those elements, there are these stories that are put together by just like, here's the shit that I like. Let's just put it all in a series together. And sometimes that works and is great. There's a lot of shit going on here. And in some of these episodes, there's a lot of elements that are interesting. But they don't necessarily go together. They don't need to be in the same episode together. They're at odds with each other sometimes. And so, and at the end, the end of this episode is just given to that rug pull, which superficially is quite a good rug pull, right? Like the world ends in 79 by nuclear fire, right? Like that's a surprising ending. That's going to look really great, and this girl goes off with, her demon lover, I mean, this, superficially, if that's how you pitch this episode, that's kind of a cool episode. But then all those other elements get involved and become, more interesting, and they don't quite fit. And as a consequence, nothing really gets fleshed out. Everything gets thrown into the pot, and the ingredients don't work together. None of them take priority.
No, you're right. I think we've said about a few episodes. No, you're right, because there's a really interesting episode in here, and it's just not the one we get, unfortunately. But some parts work. I do like some of the fun bits of this, but like it sort of promises what it could be, and when you're sort of like, oh, it could be this. Like this could have been a standout, like really dark ending of like as you say, this idea of the minority sort of being, if you turn the other cheek, you're screwed. If you shout about it, you're screwed. Like, this is unfortunately the Britain we have, and we need to do something better. But yeah, it doesn't feel like it wants to go there. It feels a bit tame.
Yeah.
A bit sort of bland. Anyway, we will be moving on. Any final thoughts?
For that action ending, going for that, you were worried in seasons 3 and 4 about kind of going for the American, sort of thing. This, 5 and 6 are more these sort of like, I've settled into the Netflix contract. I did my, honest, Black Mirror with a bigger budget. I kind of want to expand and do different stories, and 5 and 6 are doing that to their credit. If it works better than others, I think as a whole they don't work as strongly. But really, to me, that ending is it's the big budget ending, right? It's the big surprise ending, that looks great, but it's sort of like, well, gotta spend $1 million somewhere. It doesn't feel committed to what the heart of the story is.
No, I agree 100%. Yeah, maybe this is him dropping the bomb on Black Mirror. That's it. We're done. Don't know.
Yeah.
That what being wiped out and going off into the oblivion. Maybe that was a metaphor for Charlie Brooker. We don't know. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, there we are. We'll be a bit mean on Demon 79, or do you think it's fair about this? Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, let us know. Come and find us at Pod Time Space on Twitter, or sorry, on X, and then also all other social media. Come and find 20th Century Geek, and check out our Patreon. Leave a review. We've got we've got loads of bonus material, trekking through the Twilight Zone, doing a bunch of other things, loads of stuff on there. Go check it out. Anyway, for now, Julian, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. This has been great, and stay tuned for the wrap episode.
Yeah, I'm literally going to rap about Black Mirror. That's what's going to happen. No, I'm not.
Now you've got to do it.
Yeah. Give me 2 minutes. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. We'll see you on the next episode.